Chapter 6. Sam dusted off her backside as she stood. "Since we're out, should we return this gear?" He shook his head, not ready to part with the Old West clothing. "Let's see if we can keep it a little longer." The boyish eagerness in his voice elicited a grin and a chuckle from Sam. "Okay, well then what next?" Brent pulled out the folded map from his pocket and glanced over the options. "It's too early for lunch, so bobbing for apples?" She pulled back her shoulders and puffed out her chest. "I should tell you I'm a phenom at bobbing for apples, but if you don't mind being schooled, then lead the way." "Oh, you are you?" His voice contained a teasing tone and his eyes sparkled as he looked at her. The handsome lines of his face stirred a desire within her, and she averted her eyes as the heat between them coursed through her. Brent cleared his throat and touched the map. "Looks like it's to the market we go, then." After folding it, he held out his hand. Sam took it after a moment's hesitation. Not that she didn't want to hold his hand, but she wasn't prepared for the emotions that were battling in her head and heart. The two wound their way through the crowd, still watching the shootout to the supermarket. Jackson, a teen employee, and Gabriella, the supervisor of the market, stood at the apple bobbing station. Gabriella's long, dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and her darker skin glistened in the sun. Sam had been jealous of her beautiful skin tone from the moment she met her. "Oh, man, are you Derek McLeod?" Jackson asked as they approached. "Derek McLeod?" Sam asked. "My Night Ranger character's name," Brent returned. "Oh, my Lanta," Gabriella sighed. "I've seen every one of your movies. Do you think we could get an autograph?" "Sure. Do you have a pen?" Brent patted his chaps. "I didn't really bring one with me." Jackson pulled one out of his pocket, while Gabriella looked around for something to write on. But there was nothing close. "Would you sign our shirts?" she asked. Brent chuckled. "Sure, it wouldn't be the first time." "It's Gabriella, and this is Jackson with an X." "Man, I got a tweet about this too." Jackson whipped out his phone and snapped a picture as Brent signed Gabriella's shirt. "Here, let's take one together." Brent wrapped his arm around Jackson and smiled as Jackson snapped another picture. Then he signed Jackson's shirt as well. "Thanks, Mr. McLeod." "You can call me Brent, and you're welcome." "Are you two ready, then?" Gabriella asked, but her eyes never left Brent's face. "Sure, Gabriella. I told Brent here about my bobbing skills, so how do we get started?" "There are 12 apples in each bucket. You can bob from this one, and Brent can bob from Jackson's. We'll start the timer. You have 1 minute, and whoever gets the most wins." Sam tucked her hair behind her ears and turned to Brent. "You ready?" He smiled at her challenge and took up a position in front of Jackson's bucket, folding his arms behind his back. Sam assumed a similar stance and waited for the cue to begin. When she heard the bell, she dipped her head into the water. The warm water held no shock, but the apples were large and kept slipping away. She sank her teeth into one, pulled it out, and dropped it in the collection bucket. Water dripped into her eyes as she returned for more. "Time," Gabriella said a moment later. Sam wiped her eyes, disappointed in the haul. She had lost her touch. "Sam has 5 apples." Gabriella counted her stack and then turned to Brent's larger stack. "And Brent has 10? Wow, impressive work for 1 minute. You must be a man of many talents." A mischievous smile flitted across Brent's face and he shrugged. "What can I say? I'm a natural." "You get to pick a prize from the top shelf." Gabriella pointed to a silver rack against the storefront housing stuffed animals and other prizes. "Thanks for playing, and thanks again for the autograph. Have fun, you two. After shooting Sam a conspiratorial wink, Gabriella turned to the next contestant. You played me. Sam pointed her finger at him as they moved over to the shelf. You're the one who bragged you were a phenom. You never asked me if I was any good. I simply let you think you'd win. Now pick. Brent motioned to the top shelf. No, you won, so you get to pick. But I want it to be something you'll enjoy as I'm giving it to you. Consider it a thank you for letting me crash at your place. Brent's eyes held her gaze, and more than a thank you flickered in them. Sam turned her head and pointed to a stuffed bear on the top wearing cowboy boots and a cowboy hat. Brent stretched up, plucked it off the shelf, and handed it to her. As their fingertips touched, another spark ran up her arms, and she flicked her eyes up to see him staring down at her. Her heart thudded so loudly in her chest she feared it was audible. His eyes danced back and forth as they looked from her eyes to her mouth and back. It was obvious Brent wanted to kiss her, but he was leaving Monday. There was no point in allowing an experience if he would be gone in less than 48 hours. Lunch? Sam took a step back, severing the connection. Brent stared at her a moment longer before nodding and following her to the cafe. So, have you really signed people's shirts before? Sam asked, as she and Brent sat at one of the free tables. You would be surprised what I've signed, Brent said with a laugh. Oh my goodness, are you Derek McLeod? The blonde waitress asked as she approached the table. Sam recognized her from church, but didn't know her well. Does this happen everywhere you go? She asked, as Brent signed a napkin for the waitress. Not everywhere. Some people are like you and haven't seen my movies. But don't you get tired of it all? Brent's smile faded and his voice turned serious. Yeah, sometimes I do. Silence fell then, and Sam bit the inside of her lip. She hadn't meant to ruin the mood. The waitress returned a moment later and took their order, but the silence remained. Do you ever think about giving it up? Sam finally asked. Brent looked at her. I started writing a story last night. It may not amount to much, but it felt good to be writing again. I'd forgotten how much I missed it. And yes, I often think about giving it up. He paused for a moment. Do you ever think about living somewhere bigger? Sam shook her head. I don't know. I lived in the city once, and it wasn't quite what I hoped it would be. Small-town life just suits me better, I guess. The food arrived, and after a prayer, they both dug in. But Sam couldn't help wondering if Brent was thinking as she was, that they were just too different to make something work. After lunch, they climbed up on the wagon for a hayride. But although forced to squeeze next to each other, Brent did not take her hand again. Sam fought the urge to grab his, knowing it would only send a conflicting message. She had sent off a signal she wasn't ready for more. Now she needed to convince her heart of that. After the ride, they returned the rented gear and stopped into City Hall to pick up their picture before calling it a day. Ah, you've returned. Which pose do you prefer? The woman asked as she laid out 2 pictures. Sam's eyes fixed on the silly pose. The photographer had captured the emotion flowing between them. No one had stared at her like that in ages. The photographer caught her eye. That's my favorite, too. You two make the cutest couple. That one it is, then. Brent pulled money out of his pocket. Wait, we only get one picture? Sam asked. But who will keep it? I suppose you must share it. The photographer winked at the 2 of them. Sam didn't miss the subtle hints, but come Monday, Brent would leave, and this time would be nothing more than a memory. Her heart ached at the realization. Brent took the picture, and they turned to exit, almost running into Skylar and Jasmine, who worked at the diner. As Sam watched Jasmine snuggle into Skylar's arm, a pang of jealousy stabbed her heart. If only Brent weren't returning to Houston. If only they weren't from different worlds. After clearing her throat, she pasted on a smile and looked up at him. "Ready?" He motioned for her to lead the way, and they trekked back to the truck. The late afternoon sun cast shadows on the pavement, and Sam's mind wandered. What would kissing Brent McKasson be like? She sneaked a glance at Brent as she opened the door. He looked as exhausted as she felt, but happy. The stiff city posture was gone from his shoulders, and his face had relaxed into a natural smile instead of the tight scowl he had worn when she first met him. Sam's cheeks warmed as she imagined his strong arms around her. Brent's brown hair rustled in the breeze, and she couldn't help picturing running her fingers through it or imagining his face pressed against hers. "Get a hold of yourself, Sam. You said you would not fall for this guy." She blinked to clear the image and climbed in the truck, but the thought stayed. He had seemed so different, donning cowboy gear and even losing the shootout to check on her. Then there had been the almost kisses. Why hadn't she let the kiss happen? She needed to know if this connection between them was real. Sam glanced down at the stuffed cowboy bear resting on the seat in between them. Today had been the most fun she'd had since moving here, though that was mainly her fault. Having not developed a close friendship in town yet, she had thrown herself into work. She'd dined at Marnie's a few times and even ventured into the Silver Spoon once on karaoke night, but everyone had seemed so close that she wasn't sure she would fit in, so she'd never really tried. Once she'd met Fanny and Norma and the others who lived on the outskirts of town. She had stayed closer to home more often, but most of them were much older and had other interests. Her loneliness had been buried until Brent showed up and reminded her how to have fun again. Now the issue was that he wouldn't be staying. His part would be in Monday, and unless it was more than his AOS, she could fix his car and have him on the road by mid-afternoon at the latest. "That was fun today." His words broke the silence, and he turned to look at her. "Yeah, it was. I'm glad we went, though I think I will have a few nasty bruises." The shot to the chest had knocked the wind out of her when it hit, but the one she had taken to the leg smarted more. Sam hadn't felt pain like that since she tried martial arts in college and took a kick to the shin that had ached for weeks. "Yeah, my day job isn't usually so dangerous." The smile he flashed sent a fluttery sensation down her spine. "I have a stunt double for all those scenes." "What did you write last night, if it's okay to ask?" Brent pinched his lips together and ran a hand over his chin. "I don't know. Last night a story came to me about a man giving his all to God after tragedy. I have no idea where it's going, or if I'll even publish it, but your words inspired the idea." A slow burn crept up Sam's neck to the top of her ears. "Well, if you're looking for more inspiration, you could join me tomorrow for church. Pastor Ron is a good speaker." "I'd like that." When they arrived at the house, Brent excused himself to the spare room to write more, and Sam curled up on the couch with her Bible. She read through her devotional, but she couldn't keep her mind off Brent and how her life would be empty again come Tuesday.